We are recording.
Excellent.
We read 4 more chapters.
Yeah.
What did you guys think? Go ahead.
I liked, critical literacy isn't really, a new idea from the book, but this book, outlined it more of, how you can implement it and gave ideas more than, any other thing that I've read on it. And I think that's helpful. I tried it, I played around with it on a really small scale last semester. And some things worked and some things didn't, and I want to make it, I want to use it more in my classrooms, but I'm not really sure how to, continue to do that. So this was helpful to think about how to question and how to deal with kids who don't have the view that I want them to of others around them. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it laid out the 3 tenets and the 3 whatever the other thing was, made it really clear. And I also liked how she described it using the true story of the 3 little pigs, because I was familiar with that story, so I was able to kind of follow her description of how to implement critical literacy and what you could do with it in the classroom. So I also really liked the way that she laid it out in that chapter.
I agree. I liked the 3 little pigs. One thing I was sort of confused about was the diagram on page 74 with the 2 triangles and the circles and the so when I read through it made more sense, but when I was trying to go back and look at the graph again, I was confused again. But
so I think
I don't know, maybe
just means that
diagram.
Yeah,
I think it just means that they all interact.
Right.
Overlap, and that you've got all 3 sides of the triangle on both in both circles. So
here it is, just in case.
Interacting in any way, shape, or form at any time.
Right, and I think it made sense, in her writing, but whenever I look back to it, I get confused again. So maybe
I think this is a hamburger case where we have a graphic organizer, just something that it occurs from the actual understanding.
Right, which I found interesting.
Sorry, I'm moving. My computer's really hot on the tablecloth, so.
I liked the picture example at the beginning of that chapter 7 with the photographs and what it could mean on the surface, and then digging in deeper at a deeper level. That was really interesting.
Yeah, I texted my co-teacher and told her about it, and we usually do life maps in the beginning of the year when they have a picture that represents a part of their life until high school, and then what they where they plan to go. And so we're already gonna look at the life map. Oh my goodness, the life map a choice. They can do that or do something or make the picture kind of thing. So I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
I also think you could purposely take a picture of something and purposely zoom in so that there's so much more on the margin outside of the picture, and have more of a zoomed out and a perspective from the student, from the person, and a perspective from the next zoom out and bring in the outside frame.
Yeah.
I like the concept of just looking at different stories from different perspectives. I mean, take Harry Potter for example. I know, again, I'm using pictures, but if he told the story from Snape's perspective instead of from Harry's perspective, you have a completely different story.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of those activities that were on the reconstructing activities could be interesting to do in our presentation as well. I'm trying to remember what page those were on.
I think I'm 77.
Yeah, about there, right?
Yeah, 76, 77.
Yeah, like reading a family text and then asking them if it's exactly like their family, and if not, how would you change it to make it like your family? Or like you just said, Melanie, take a really common text and think about it from the villain's perspective, or some one of those that maybe hasn't been done.
Sometimes you have a very opinionated newspaper article, and it takes the perspective, opposite perspective of that article. How people's perception of the article, the information the article, can change when the perspective of the person who's writing it, and I guess the power is.
Mm-hmm.
Moving to the last chapter, the chapter 8, that was the one that I found to be the most, I don't know, intriguing about this mother-daughter relationship, and how, like Kaylee, you posted that quote, which I actually ended up just putting in my blog because it's so interesting to me, but like that in St. Francis, a girl equals a mother or a future mother.
Mm-hmm.
That concept was so interesting to me that, like, usually a young mother was kind of the implication that I got. And not that there's anything wrong with anything about that, I don't think. But I think not having another option was something that really, like, sticks out to me. And I kind of talked about how when I used to work at this pool, it was in a really, like, low socioeconomic neighborhood, and like kids could get in for free or for 50 cents or whatever. And there were so many girls who were younger than me with their children, and sometimes 2, 3, or 4 children. And but what was really interesting about that was that, like, their community was so, like, tight knit that, like, everybody was watching everybody's kids, or they would take their kids to the pool, and, like, just that sense of community was like a big resource that I don't know outside of my own immediate family that I would personally have in the same instance, you know? So I don't know, I just thought that was all really interesting.
And connecting to that, the circle of, you know, where a lot of people don't get out of that cycle. When I was looking at Arcola, they had to actually write into the handbook that high schoolers could not bring their new babies to share, you know, to show to the other. They actually had to put that in the handbook because there for a while we were having, you know, 15, 16, 17-year-olds that would come and bring their newborn infants for everybody to see. And the same sort of mentality of, you know, I've got, you know, to keep that at a bare minimum, to actually put it in the handbook.
That sounds kind of problematic in some ways. Like that there's not another, you know, I don't know, that there should be, like, more services for young mothers so that they can stay in school and have, you know, daycare or...
Found that in the bigger schools, in the bigger communities. I look at Peoria, and Peoria has 1,000 different community services. They have the crisis nursery, they have the crisis center, they have the children's home. They have all these different services, but when you're looking at Arcola that, you know, has at most 3 restaurants, they don't have the of these services.
Right.
But outlawing them and not allowing them to bring their babies to school kind of reminds me of, was it chapter 5 that talked about the silencing? That definitely silenced those girls and made them feel like they didn't belong anywhere, really. Because if you don't belong in high school when you're a teenager, you know, where do you belong?
I think it was more of a situation where if they had dropped out, they weren't allowed to come back and bring their show and tell then.
I see.
I think the initiative was to try to get them to stay in school. and try to. I don't think they came really effective, but
I don't think that the audio is picking you up, Melanie, because of the background noise of Allison.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Just say what you were saying again.
No, I was just saying that even I don't think their perspective was to silence, but that's how what that happened.
Yeah.
I think that's a theme that goes throughout the book, is that, like, probably no teachers in St. Francis are trying to be malicious or silencing a child, but, like, without a knowledge and, like, a concrete kind of understanding of students that that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the two comments that she mentioned on page 48 being like offensive about social class, rough around the edges, or from the wrong side of town, like I just never even thought about those comments being offensive. You just hear them so often.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what, like, when she said that, like, people don't want to talk about race or religion or, like, topics like that, because they can be controversial, but people have no problem taking comments like that about social class. It was like I'd never thought about that. Like, it's so true, though.
That's really true in my experience as well.
Yeah, definitely.
When we, at the end of our last school year, we had our last PD, when our staff got together and looked at school-wide data, and in groups we talked about like what we noticed, and then tried to come up with some goals that we thought were important, and then we shared out as like the whole staff. And now we made a school improvement plan, like more or less as a staff. And I remember like some of the like everything that kept coming up was like minorities, free and reduced lunch. They had like the most suspensions, the most failures, the most retention rates, the most referrals, and it was like, well, it's the culture, and it's the, you know what I mean. And I think that at some point it has to be like, well, what can we do about it? You know, you can't just like accept that as like the stereotype or like the standard. And so sometimes like even at, like having a building conversation, it's hard to get who are supposed to be like professionals teaching economic status to like realize that you can't just hold low standards like that.
Yeah, you have to figure out a way to meet those students where they are and build from there.
Do you think too that maybe like they were focusing kind of on race, but that maybe it was more of like a economic issue, or like other factors that could have played into some of those referrals? And I don't know, like I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh, like it sounded like they were saying, oh, this is just their, were they saying it was a school culture, or were they saying it was like a racial culture that was?
It's like it's like a race thing. Like it's acceptable to like I don't know, like to be disrespectful or to like talk out in like the African American culture where it's like that's not a school appropriate behavior, and they need to figure out how to like fit into our our box. I feel like rather than like we need to kind of figure out how to reach all of our students.
That's really interesting to me. That I don't know. So like people were making like grand sweeping gestures about their culture.
I mean, it would be like, well, it's kind of like, well, it's always been that way. Like, well, they have the biggest referral rates because like their parents aren't home, or because they have 8 siblings, so like they're not going to pay attention to the kid in high school. And and then I don't feel like I feel like, and it's like maybe that is true. Like maybe there are a lot of children in their home, and to the family, it's not most important that they get their English homework done. It's more important that everyone's taken care of and there's food on the table. But I think at some point, like you want to keep the conversation like, okay, yes, that's their situation, but now what can we do between 8 and 3:30 when they're here?
Right. And also, is it every single Black student's story at your school?
Right.
You know, like that's really, that gets into some more. I don't know. It's kind of like when you say, "Oh, they're from the wrong side of the tracks. They're not going to be able to sue the school," like that kind of stuff. It's like, I don't know. You get into some issues of discrimination there when you just assume that every, like every student.
Yeah. I mean, you do have to keep some cultural aspects in mind. Like, I know with the Latino culture, it's children learn at home by asking questions. And then when we don't allow them to ask a bunch of questions in school because, we're the teacher and we're giving the directions and you just need to follow the directions, that's like really jarring for them because they're used to asking all those questions. And I kind of have to keep that in mind when I'm teaching those students. So I don't know, you do have to keep some of those cultural things in mind. So if the African American students do want to have those discussions and talk out about what they're learning, could you restructure the class so that it was more like a roundtable discussion? Or you've got to be thinking about what you can do in the classroom to play to those kids' strengths.
Yeah, and I think the way that like you phrase it matters too. Like I think Allison, you were saying like from your perspective, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think from your perspective, you're saying, okay, yes, there are cultural differences, but how are we gonna, like Kaylee said, restructure the classroom to meet their needs? And it sounded like whoever was kind of doing the data presentation was thinking more of like, well, this is just how it's gonna be. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't like as a whole, but there were definitely like more people that made me comfortable that would like just kind of like, well, they're always going to be like that because they don't. I mean, that's just the way they are. Like, well,
yeah, we have that.
Yeah, like we still have to meet their needs, and that's like when we talk about like the Common Core standards, and I don't even remember where I was going with that. Never mind.
Well, Kaylee, what you were saying, and I was told this in a parenting class that I went to the other night, that Common Core are teaching our children to ask questions, to stop and to ask questions, and to constantly, okay, so why this, why that? And the old mentality of parenting was that, that children are quiet and they don't ever question parents' authority or discipline. And now that in school we're teaching them to question everything, when they come home and they're taught to question, and that parenting styles have to change because it's different. A 3-year-old asking, well, why do I have to pick up my toys versus a 14-year-old saying, well, why do I have to have a curfew? But you've got to treat each child's question differently. But for a 3-year-old to understand, okay, the reason why we pick up our toys is because we respect our house, and to respect our house is to pick up after ourselves. And to have this, okay, in school it's okay to question, and at home it's not okay to question, they're getting mixed messages.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Yeah, I agree.
And I think, Kaylee, like, when you were saying, like, you have to keep that in mind when you're teaching, like, I think it is kind of hard sometimes to, like, you're trying to get through your content, you're trying to get your lesson done in a certain amount of time. It's this question and this question, and sometimes it's the same kid asking question after question after question after question, and it can be kind of frustrating. And I think keeping that in mind is really important, like you said, to remember, okay, this is how they learn, and I need to be respectful of that. And maybe we don't get through our lesson today because we're actually making these connections, which is also learning and important.
And then once again, there's a fine line, especially when I think of my 7th graders and them questioning because they want to understand and make connections versus them questioning just to get off topic and waste time.
Right. Well, when you start getting the same question over and over, then it's time to move on. Or if it's the same kid, get the rest of the class started and pull him or her aside and then answer those questions.
And a lot of times if you say, you know what, that's a really good question, why don't you research that? Why don't you look into it and turn it around and put it on them? Then all of a sudden the questions stop.
All right. Well, I think we have about 15 minutes. Let me check.